The Times out of the UK has this article talking about the lost boys, how a generation of young men fell behind women on pay, and we're about to talk about it. So, this article is coming out of the UK, and this article is behind a paywall. The Lost Boys, how a generation of young men fell behind women on pay. A sobering report details their struggles before primary school even begins, a dearth of role models, and the decline of blue collar jobs. Now, this could have been written, and this exact article has been written for the United States. It seems that boys and men are having troubles globally. Won't anyone think of the boys? Young women are now consistently earning more than their male counterparts for the first time, according to a report that warns of a social crisis gripping young men. So, women earning more money is creating a crisis in men. Isn't that wild, the language that they're using? Women and girls aged 16 to 24 in both white collar and blue collar jobs make nearly 10% more on average than their male peers, according to the Center for Social Justice, or CSJ think tank. The report, Lost Boys, highlights how a generation of young men are facing far worse outcomes than young women in education and beyond, falling further behind by virtually every yardstick, while changing social attitudes leave them feeling isolated. Boys and young men are in crisis, the report says. Whilst the last 100 years have been marked by great leaps forward in outcomes and rights for women, in this generation it is boys who are being left behind, and by some margin. From the day they start primary school to the day they leave higher education, the progress of boys lags behind girls. I hate the way they word this because they leave out the fact that women and girls are and have been oppressed in many of these patriarchal countries. So women had to overcome all of these things to get their rights and get opportunities to make these leaps and bounds. What oppression do young men and boys face to where they are in a crisis? They might be lagging behind, but they're not lagging behind because of systemic obstacles. The report found that the coronavirus pandemic and the consequences of lockdowns have only increased the gap between young men and women. Since the pandemic alone, the number of males aged 16 to 24 who are not in education, employment, or training has increased by a staggering 40% compared to just 7% of females, it adds. Like I said, this article is out of the UK, and here's the chart for NEET. 1 in 7 young men are out of work and education. So they're not working, they're not training, they're not doing anything. So the men are up here and the women are down here. The women, regardless of the pandemic, the situation, they are overcoming obstacles where the young men are not. And once again, what oppression are these young men facing to where they just can't get it together? For those young men who are in full-time work, the much vaunted gender pay gap has been reversed. Young men are now out-earned by their female peers, including among the university educated. In 2020 to 2021, the average young man earned £24,000, slightly over, and the average young woman earned £23,000, or slightly over. Those figures crossed the following year. Then, as male wages virtually stagnate, female wages climb significantly. By 2022 to 2023, the average young man earned £24,000 and the average young woman is earning over £26,000, which is 9% more. Now, they are hand-wringing and this is now a crisis, but like I keep saying, men have not been oppressed. So I don't know why this is a crisis and why they don't just encourage the men to work harder. The report blames the decline of traditionally male-dominated industries such as manufacturing, agriculture, and construction for causing a rapid fall in secure, well-paid, and meaningful jobs that used to be available to non-university educated young men. The CSJ's analysis also shows that at all stages of our education system, boys are behind, beginning in early years and persisting all the way to higher education. The report also warns that young men are lacking key role models and that traditional male values have been undermined. A poll conducted for the report found that more than 4 in 10 agree society does not value traditional masculine values, such as courage, resilience, and competitiveness. At the same time, half of men aged 18 to 24 say men are too often shown by the media as a bit pathetic. The patriarchy is on the decline, and women are busting out of these boxes. Men will eventually have to bust out of those boxes where they are defined by this very stringent box. They're going to have to get out of that box because it seems like their purpose and their beliefs are really tied to that, and they're not doing the work. They don't want to do the work if they can't, compete with women. And it is pathetic. I think that that is pathetic. But they're talking about how men are shown in the media. I think it's pathetic of them to not compete simply because traditional masculine values are not propped up or whatever. Also, we do need to highlight that they're talking about there are not any masculine role models. Where are the men in all of this? Are the men going to come in and create a game plan to gather some of these boys and young men and mentor them? I don't think so. But, that's what they're saying. They don't have any role models. Well, bring on the dang on role models. All right, let's get back to it. The CSJ has a long track record of having its solutions, which, for this issue, are due to be presented in the second report, adopted by governments. Founded by the former Tory leader, Sir Ian Duncan Smith, its State of the Nation reports on the broken welfare system were the driving force behind the creation of universal credit and landmark legislation to combat modern slavery and human trafficking. The think tank enjoys cross-party support, and its interest in social issues is shared by the Blue Labor Group, which is growing in influence on labor's backbenches. The Lost Boys report was also endorsed by Andy Burnham, the Labor mayor of Greater Manchester. The former Conservative MP, Miriam Cates, a senior fellow at CSJ, said, "For too long, politicians, policymakers, and the media and the arts have turned a blind eye to the needs of boys in the name of equality. We are now reaping the whirlwind." So in the name of equality. So if women and girls would have stayed oppressed, men and boys would be perfectly fine. But now that equality is here and there's more gender parity, the boys are failing and flailing. And oh my God, what are we going to do to ring this back in? This is Miriam. I hear her right now saying, "But what about the boys? But what about the boys?" Far from creating equality, we have penalized young men for the crime of being male, labeling them toxic and problematic and failing to provide a positive vision of masculinity. Things need to change, and fast. Education. Our education system is not working for boys, the report warns. From the day they start primary school to the day they leave higher education, the progress of boys lags behind girls. One of Sir Keir Starmer's government milestones is to ensure that 75% of reception-age children are ready for school. The figure is currently 67%, but this conceals a huge gender gap. 75% of girls are school ready, compared with just 60% of boys. On average, across every subject at GCSE, boys' results are half a grade lower than the girls. At A level, girls outperform boys by an average of more than a grade and a half across their best 3 subjects. Boys are also twice as likely as girls to be excluded from school, while in British universities, female students outnumber males by 3 to 2. Employment. From July to September last year, 15.1% of men aged 16 to 24 were not in education, employment, or training, compared to just 11.2% of women. The percentage equates to 550,000 men, an increase of more than 150,000 on pre-pandemic levels. Young men aged 16 to 24 are also much more likely to be unemployed than young women. Male-dominated industries such as manufacturing, agriculture, and construction amount to just 16% of GDP in 2023, compared with more than 40% in 1970. If the issues are starting here in grade school, and if the issues are there are not enough male role models, they need to stop blaming equality and put the blame solely on the males for not providing those role models for these boys and helping them starting early on in the childhood. And, like I said, this sounds literally like it could have been out of America. Join the conversation. Let me know what you think about all this. Don't forget to like, comment, and share.